Hi, everybody. I'm Lee Cade, and this is Therapeutic Thursday. It's a weekly series we do here at Valley Behavioral Health to cover some of those therapeutic things that pop up or therapeutic issues that pop up, or in some cases, it might even be something that has to do with the realm of mental or behavioral health that may not be common knowledge for all of us. Today, we're taking just a little bit of a detour from what we normally cover because this is, as the last week of March, Autism Awareness Week. So we wanted to talk with somebody who actually works with Pingree Center. And today we have Rafael Ochoa, who is a attending clinician at the Pingree Center and was gracious enough to talk to us today about autism. How are you?
Doing great. Yeah, just having some fun at the Pingree Center. So always a good time here.
Yeah, it is a very, very active place. And from what I've noticed, it's definitely a passion for a lot of the people that work there. They're so engaged and invested.
It's good cardio. It's good fun. You hear the pitter patter of the kids. It's a great time.
Yeah, you do quite a bit of running up there, I know.
Yeah. So always good for your heart rate.
So with this being Autism Awareness Week and with Utah having like the second highest autism rate in the country, I'm always kind of surprised at how little people actually know about autism. So I'm just going to ask the obvious question, the simplest question: what is autism?
Yeah, and I think a lot of people have the same question, especially in this field. So, I mean, the big definition is developmental disability. So something that's going differently in their head that's not going on maybe neurotypical brains. The way I like to put it, though, is they just think a little differently than us. They communicate a little differently than us. And it's just such a big spectrum that you can have all these different kind of characteristics and types and quirks that belong to the same kind of group. It's just so broad that you can see somebody that maybe doesn't have communication skills, that's having trouble telling you what they want, and somebody that's, I mean, they would be considered a savant, a genius, can do something super well, but maybe doesn't have that social skill. So there's all that stuff in between it.
Right. And it is a spectrum disorder, correct?
Exactly. Yeah. So spectrum is a very, very good term for that. It's a wide spectrum.
I loved one of the people I talked to said one of the magical things about autism is that if you've met one person with autism, you've met that person.
That's one of my favorite quotes too. And I think it really puts it all into perspective. They're all so different. It's like little snowflakes. You get somebody different every time.
Now, some of the things that I've seen and experienced in my own work with folks with autism is sometimes you have some things like a perseverant personality where someone will perseverate on something in a way that you may not be used to. So for instance, one of the kids I worked with back in the 90s, he was completely fixated on Ovation guitars. And so he would talk about Ovation guitars for probably 12 of his 18 waking hours.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I know with me, I think one of the big things that I got into autism with is I was at a school. There was this kid when I was in the special education classes that loved baseball, and I'm a huge baseball fan. And he could tell you, if you just said Giants versus Dodgers, game 180 or 120, and he'd be like, oh, that was May 2nd, 1985. Right. He could tell you the starting lineups, and I was just so amazed by it. And every time I went into class, I'd be like, oh, can you tell me something else? That. So I think it's really incredible that they can be that focused on one topic and know everything about that topic that most of us would never even have an idea of how to remember.
Now, autism in itself is not a typical disorder, but there are some things that sometimes come along with autism and that might help understand how a person fits in with that diagnosis. What would those typically be?
Yeah, I think one of the big things and like what you're looking for usually is that perseverance that you're talking about. So really liking a specific topic that maybe isn't socially normal, that everyone doesn't like. Stimming, you'll see a lot, I think, especially in the younger kids, where they're maybe rocking back and forth, doing a repetitive movement. And that's really just to balance them, something that we normally might do by fidgeting our fingers. They're going to do it in a little bit more of like an obvious way. Communication skills, not being able to verbalize things. So those are like the main three things that you'll look for. And then you always have those behavioral pieces.
Yeah, sometimes the behavioral interaction is just, there's a missing component or something that doesn't make sense. And it's hard for them to associate with what it is that you're trying to put across, right?
Exactly. And I think one of the best ways that I've heard it be put is that they don't have the same kind of social interactions. They don't have the same kind of like motivation of, oh, I wonder what people will think. I wonder how people will react to this. They're kind of living with whatever motivation is internal and not worrying about what society is really thinking about them.
Now, with autism spectrum disorder, you have such a wide level of difference in functioning for some folks. So you have people, I have a friend who's actually on the autism spectrum, and he's an IT designer. He works with computers day in and day out. That's what he's fascinated with. In his case, he doesn't have any problems in talking with people, aside from the fact that sometimes he doesn't understand why we don't want to talk about computers all the time. But for the most part, we interact, we get along just fine. But on the other end of the spectrum, you have folks who may need help with just basic hygiene functions for the rest of their lives. Do we know what the cause of that is, or is it just that there's a degree of severity that can pop up?
I think it just depends on kind of developmentally what happened. I know there's a big thing of early diagnosis and early treatment does help, but it's really hard to say of what's really causing the severity of this.
It seems like there are a lot more folks who have been diagnosed with autism now than there were, say, in the 80s and 90s. Are we seeing more autism, or are we just understanding autism better?
I think it's definitely just understanding it better. I think there's more resources out there to be able to diagnose it. I know, especially with me and coming from the Latino community, it really just has to do with, I think we had parents that either hid these kind of characteristics, they were scared of what other people would think, so they wouldn't take them to the doctor. And now that it's a lot more open, we have a lot more communication, there's more resources, I think we're just seeing it way more often. But I could imagine just hearing from my family, like cousins that I knew before, that they're like, oh, they're just a little different. Even like the really sad part of like, oh, they're just sick, they're sick. And it's not a sickness, it's something that is just different in them. So I think really just communities talking about it more really makes it easier.
Yeah, that acceptance and that openness, and hopefully we can make it so that it's something that's a lot easier for their families to work through.
Exactly. And I mean, of course, some of it is having them be able to fit with what society wants them to do, but it's also us opening up to them and having things more open for them, where it comes to like, if they want to go to a dance, let's have some headphones available. Let's have some silent options. Let's have low sensory things. Just really creating the world where they have the option to be themselves and live through it without having us try to like mold them to what we want them to be. I think that's really important.
So if I wanted to learn more about autism, I ask this from everybody who works in our field of work, because everybody has a different thing that they find inspiring or educational. Where would you personally direct somebody who wanted to learn more about this actually really fascinating disorder?
Yeah, I know there's a bunch of good documentaries, and I don't have them off the top of my list, but looking up some like Autism First, documenting what they see, but actual people with autism documenting what they feel and what they are. I think really getting in there in person, if you can find volunteer experience, I think that's a really good way, because you can see it on video as much as you want, but being there and seeing it in person and talking to them really helps out a lot.
And I know one of the ways that you could volunteer, if you would like, is the Adult Autism Center will be opening up here shortly. And they're actually looking for volunteers to help out, whether it's with exercise classes or with gardening. And it would be a way that you could give back to the community and actually maybe meet some new friends who might look at the world just a slight bit different than you do.
Yes, exactly. You might find a new best friend that knows exactly what you like and can tell you way more than you've ever needed to know about that topic.
Well, Rafael, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today about autism, and we'll definitely be checking back with you later, because this is a topic that we could all learn so much more about. So thank you so much for your time and your knowledge.
Awesome. Thank you.